You look around this world, and you see men chasing shadows, illusions shaped like women. They call it love, they call it attraction, they call it romance. But what Diogenes saw, long before your modern world dressed it up with poetry and perfume, was something far darker and far more honest. He said that man's downfall begins the moment he confuses admiration with desire, the moment his reason bows to the altar of beauty. He watched men in the streets of Athens crumble at the sight of a woman's smile, abandoning their discipline, their logic, their self-command. They became actors performing for approval, mistaking weakness for affection. And Diogenes laughed, because to him, nothing was more tragic than a man who believed he was chasing a woman, when in truth he was running from himself. You see, Diogenes understood something few ever grasp, that a woman's allure is not simply a force of attraction, but a mirror reflecting the instability within a man's soul. When a man lacks clarity, when his mind is clouded with hunger, the illusion of beauty consumes him. He no longer sees a woman, he sees a fantasy of what he wants to feel: validation, approval, escape. And that, Diogenes said, is the beginning of slavery. He refused to participate in that illusion. When women mocked him for his indifference, he remained unbothered. When others pursued love like a game of conquest, Diogenes stripped the game of meaning. His defiance was not against women, it was against dependency. He understood that to desire without mastery is to hand over your freedom. And in his eyes, most men had already surrendered long before they ever touched the woman they desired. A woman's beauty, he believed, was a test from nature, not a gift. It was a mirror designed to expose the level of discipline within a man. The weak man melts in the heat of her attention. The strong man remains composed, not because he doesn't feel attraction, but because he refuses to be ruled by it. He observes, he studies, he understands, but he never kneels. That was the mark of Diogenes' wisdom, to remain human without becoming enslaved by human desire. He lived among temptations yet stayed detached. In his simplicity he found power. While others spent their nights chasing affection, Diogenes spent his time mastering perception. He realized that women, consciously or not, respect the man who sees through the illusion. Because when a man resists what others worship, he becomes something different. He becomes unpredictable, untamed, and mysterious. Women, he noticed, do not test men for cruelty's sake. They test them to find strength, to see who can remain calm amidst chaos, who can hold his frame when emotions try to shake him. Most men fail this test not because women deceive them, but because they deceive themselves. They chase the idea of winning her heart, while she silently measures their ability to lead themselves. Diogenes exposed this dynamic centuries before psychology had a name for it. He saw that attraction is not created through charm, wealth, or looks, but through inner stillness. The man who does not need commands respect. The man who can admire beauty without losing his mind to it holds power. And this truth terrified those around him, because it meant that love, seduction, and control were not games of manipulation, but reflections of discipline. He taught that the moment a man gives a woman the power to define his worth, he has already lost the throne of his own mind. And the tragedy is that most men offer that throne willingly. They confuse attention with affection, desire with validation. But Diogenes' indifference revealed something timeless, that women are not drawn to the man who worships them, but to the man who understands them without bending. His detachment was not arrogance, it was mastery. He was not cold, he was awake. He saw that when you chase beauty without understanding, you are not loving, you are consuming. And consumption always leads to emptiness. But when you observe beauty with clarity, without falling into illusion, you begin to see what Diogenes saw, that the true game is not between man and woman, but between illusion and truth. Every time you feel the pull of attraction, you are standing at the same crossroads Diogenes stood at. You can either chase the image and lose yourself in pursuit, or you can watch the illusion dissolve and rise above it. Most men will never pass that test because they want comfort more than power. They want warmth more than wisdom. But Diogenes proved that only through detachment can desire become strength. He taught that when a man is no longer hypnotized by the external, he becomes magnetic to it. Women sense that difference, the calm, the unshaken presence, the quiet command. It's not arrogance, it's centeredness. And in that state, beauty becomes something to appreciate, not something to chase. The illusion fades, and what remains is vision, the ability to see a woman as she is, not as your mind paints her. Diogenes decoded desire by stripping it of lies. He showed that to master attraction, you must first master perception. You must train your mind to see through the mask of emotion and charm. You must learn to admire without addiction, to engage without surrender, to connect without losing command. And when you do, you'll understand the first law of power in the realm of the feminine psyche, that the man who does not need to possess beauty becomes the one beauty cannot possess. Diogenes once said that man learns the most not by what people tell him, but by what they reflect back at him. And nowhere is that more visible than in the eyes of a woman. He observed that a woman, in her essence, does not reveal a man's truth, she mirrors it. Her emotions, her reactions, her tone all shift according to what stands before her. When a man is grounded, she softens. When he is uncertain, she becomes restless. When he doubts himself, she becomes distant. Diogenes saw this long before psychology ever tried to label it. To him, this was not manipulation, but nature, a dance of mirrored energies where woman becomes the reflection of man's inner state. He believed that most men misunderstand women because they seek to control their behavior instead of mastering their own presence. A woman's energy, he noted, is like water. It flows around strength but crashes against weakness. The more a man tries to force her, the more she resists. The more he stands firm within himself, the more she naturally aligns with his rhythm. This is why Diogenes mocked men who tried to argue with women or reason with their emotions. He said, "You do not argue with the wind, you learn to sail it." And this truth is still hidden from most men today. They keep searching for words, techniques, and tricks to understand women, when what they should be doing is understanding themselves. A woman's response is not random, it's feedback. When she withdraws, it's not always rejection, sometimes it's reflection. She's showing you where you lost your frame. When she challenges you, it's not cruelty, it's nature's test, asking if your strength is real or merely rehearsed. Diogenes saw that human relationships were built upon mirrors. You attract not what you desire, but what you are. And a woman, being more emotionally intuitive, reflects that truth faster than anyone. When you are calm, she feels safe. When you are lost, she becomes uncertain. This, Diogenes said, is why most men fail in love. They think they can fake power, when in reality, energy cannot be faked. A man's inner chaos will always surface through her reactions. He described women not as unpredictable, but as responsive. Their emotions move like tides under the pull of a man's gravity. If that gravity is weak, the waves become violent. If it is steady, the sea becomes still. Diogenes lived his life in poverty, yet carried an authority that made kings uneasy. He had no gold, no army, no women chasing him, yet when he spoke, even Alexander the Great listened. That was the power of presence, and Diogenes understood that the same principle ruled the realm of attraction. He would often sit and observe lovers in the marketplace. The man who sought to impress always failed. The man who carried himself with quiet certainty always drew attention. Diogenes didn't need to test this theory, he lived it. When you command yourself, you command perception. When you lose control of yourself, you become a performer on someone else's stage. And that's exactly how most men live, dancing for approval, begging for emotional stability, when all they need is to master their own. He saw that the female psyche responds to one thing above all, energetic truth. If your words and your energy do not align, she feels it. She may not articulate it, but she senses it, and her reactions expose it. That's why Diogenes dismissed flattery and performance. He believed that authenticity is the only real seduction, and that control begins with emotional congruence. To understand the female mind, Diogenes taught, a man must stop observing her and start observing himself. Every time she withdraws, ask, what in me triggered that? Every time she tests, ask, where am I uncertain? For he knew that women, consciously or not, draw out the unresolved within men. They magnify his insecurities, his pride, his emotional weaknesses, not to destroy him, but to reveal them. The woman becomes the mirror through which the man sees his own soul. That's why Diogenes warned against blaming women for confusion or chaos. He said it's not the mirror's fault if the reflection is unclear, it's the man's. He insisted that the greatest mastery is not over others, but over the self. If you want peace with women, you must first find peace within your mind, because when your inner world is stable, their emotional storms can no longer drown you. Diogenes' insight was brutal but liberating. Women don't crave perfection, they crave polarity. A man who is anchored, unshaken, and fully present. Not emotionally dead, but emotionally disciplined. The one who can feel without being ruled by feeling. The one who can listen without losing himself in her words. Such a man becomes rare, magnetic, and unforgettable. In the modern world, men drown in confusion, asking why she pulled away, why she lost interest, why she no longer respects him. Diogenes would smile and say, because she stopped seeing a man, and started seeing a boy pretending to be one. She mirrored his uncertainty back at him, and until he evolves beyond it, every woman he meets will reflect the same story. Different faces, same lesson. Diogenes exposed that relationships are not about control but reflection. He showed that the feminine psyche does not create chaos. It exposes the chaos already within the man. The test is not in decoding her behavior, but in mastering your own presence so completely that her emotions no longer dictate your direction. For the one who conquers himself, every mirror becomes still. In the streets of Athens, Diogenes walked with a lantern in his hand in broad daylight. When asked what he searched for, he said, I am looking for an honest man. But those words carried more than mockery for human deceit. They carried the secret to understanding attraction, mystery, and control. He was not just searching for honesty in others. He was revealing that most men are dishonest with themselves. They pretend to be confident, yet their confidence depends on who is watching. They pretend to be in control, yet they are slaves to attention. And this weakness, Diogenes observed, is what women sense immediately. He believed that mystery and control were not tactics. They were the natural state of a man who belongs to himself. The more a man exposes his hunger for approval, the less valuable he becomes. A man who constantly explains himself, seeks validation, and fears rejection reveals that his center lies outside him. But a man who stands in silence, who allows misunderstanding without the need to defend it, that man radiates the quiet strength of mastery. Women feel that energy like gravity. They are drawn not to the noise of men, but to their restraint. Diogenes understood that mystery is not about being distant, it is about being whole. The reason most men fail to create that sense of depth is because they are fragmented. They show one part of themselves and hide the rest out of fear. But when a man becomes integrated, when his desires, thoughts, and actions align, he no longer chases validation. His mystery comes naturally because he is no longer performing. His silence speaks louder than words, and his presence becomes a signal of power. He taught that a man should never rush to fill the silence in the presence of a woman. Silence is the realm where mystery is born and where power breathes. Men who fear silence are men who fear their own thoughts. But when a man grows comfortable in stillness, he becomes the embodiment of control. Women sense this not through what he says, but through what he doesn't say. That unspoken calm, that quiet certainty, triggers curiosity, respect, and attraction. Diogenes' life was a reflection of this principle. He had nothing, no wealth, no social status, no possessions. Yet his presence unsettled kings. He was untouchable because he desired nothing from them. The more people mocked him, the more his composure revealed their weakness. This is the paradox of power. The less you chase it, the more it surrounds you. And Diogenes carried that truth like armor. He knew that when you stop being reactive, you become magnetic. Women, Diogenes observed, are not drawn to the loud man, but to the man who can maintain composure while the world around him trembles. Emotional control is not suppression, it is direction. A man must not drown in his emotions, but learn to channel them with precision. When a woman tests him when she provokes, questions, or withdraws, it is not to destroy him, but to measure his depth. She wants to know whether he is water or stone. The weak man splashes, reacts, complains, and tries to fix everything instantly. The strong man remains unmoved. He lets the moment pass through him because he knows that his energy dictates hers. Diogenes believed that self-control was the highest form of intelligence. To master one's reactions is to hold power that cannot be stolen. A woman can manipulate emotion, but not composure. That is why the man who feels deeply yet stays calm in expression becomes irresistible. His mystery lies not in what he hides, but in what he can contain. His restraint creates tension, and that tension is the foundation of attraction. Most men today live in emotional chaos. They overshare, overreact, and overexplain. They try to convince women of their worth instead of embodying it. Diogenes would call this the theater of insecurity, men performing strength because they haven't built it. But true mystery cannot be acted. It is born from self-possession, from a man who knows himself so completely that he no longer seeks to prove it. He taught that power in relationships is not about dominance or control over another. It is about control over yourself. The one who can remain still when provoked, silent when challenged, and calm when desired holds the upper hand in every exchange. His value rises because his emotions are not for sale, and the woman, even if she cannot explain it, feels the weight of that power. She begins to chase the understanding of what cannot be easily read. His silence, his restraint, his mystery. Diogenes' way was not to seduce but to remain sovereign. His detachment created the allure that others tried to imitate. Because when you desire nothing, everything becomes drawn to you. Mystery is not manipulation, it is the echo of a man's inner completeness. And emotional control is not suppression, it is the discipline to let passion serve reason, not replace it. He often laughed at men who claimed to know how to attract women. To him, attraction was not something you do, it is something you become. The more you master your inner world, the less you need to chase the outer one. Women are not drawn to mystery because it is confusing, but because it reveals depth. It shows there is something behind the surface that cannot be easily conquered. Diogenes showed that a man's mystery is his defense against mediocrity. It protects his essence from dilution. The man who exposes everything loses his edge, while the man who reveals selectively commands attention. Emotional control and mystery walk hand in hand. One protects the mind, the other guards the soul. Together, they create presence, and presence is the true magnetism that no words can replicate. Diogenes believed that the highest form of mastery is not the control of others, but the control of self. He lived by what can only be called the Diogenic law of value, that what cannot be controlled must be understood, and what is understood cannot enslave you. He saw men and women both as creatures of desire, forever trying to claim what they did not comprehend. But he noticed something peculiar. Whenever a man tried to possess beauty, he lost himself, and whenever he sought to understand it, he found power. The female psyche, Diogenes said, was not a riddle to be solved, but a mirror to be studied, and only the man who can stand before that mirror without illusion becomes free. He saw that men lose value the moment they start competing for attention. The more they chase, the less they are worth. He said that the man who begs for validation becomes invisible, while the one who walks away from it becomes desired. To understand this is to see the world through the eyes of power, because attraction, respect, and influence all orbit around the same principle, perceived value. A man who leads himself needs no permission to exist. His worth is self-generated, and that independence, that quiet indifference to approval, is what ignites curiosity in the feminine mind. Diogenes rejected the idea that love should be a negotiation of needs. He saw that most relationships collapse because both parties seek control rather than understanding. The man tries to dominate, the woman tests to measure authenticity, and both fail because neither seeks truth, they seek leverage. But Diogenes stood apart from this chaos. He was not moved by validation, not disturbed by rejection. He treated both praise and insult as noise, because the moment you allow others to define your worth, you become their subject. He observed that the female psyche is drawn to the man who governs his own emotions, not the one who suppresses them, but the one who transforms them into clarity. To him, emotional sovereignty was the foundation of value. If a woman's emotions are a storm, the man must be the mountain, not immovable out of pride, but steady out of wisdom, because no matter how chaotic the wind becomes, the mountain remains, shaping the weather yet never shaped by it. Diogenes mocked the men who tried to buy love with gifts or words. He said they were like merchants trying to sell counterfeit gold. A woman, he claimed, does not truly seek comfort or wealth. She seeks the presence of a man who cannot be owned. The paradox is that the more a man needs to be desired, the less desirable he becomes. But when he can stand alone, content in solitude, his presence becomes a force. It is then that the female mind begins to orbit as calm, wondering what makes him so complete. In Diogenes' eyes, value was not displayed, it was felt. You did not prove it, you embodied it. He believed that when a man operates from need, every action carries the scent of desperation. But when he operates from purpose, every gesture radiates command. This is what modern men forget. Women do not follow words, they follow emotional gravity. And that gravity is built through self-sufficiency. The man who leads himself does not need to demand loyalty, it comes naturally because his presence inspires it. He often told his students that to master attraction, one must stop performing and start observing. Watch how people react when you no longer seek approval. Watch how energy shifts when your silence replaces effort. The same woman who ignores your pursuit begins to wonder why you've stopped chasing. Her curiosity becomes attraction because it is born from confusion, and confusion always follows power. Diogenes' understanding of value went beyond relationships. It was a philosophy of existence. He believed that a man's worth was measured by how little he could be disturbed. The one who remains calm in insult, patient in rejection, and grounded in uncertainty is a man who cannot be manipulated. And such a man becomes rare because he cannot be swayed by praise nor destroyed by disapproval. The more he detaches from external validation, the more he commands it without asking. He observed that women instinctively test for this strength, not out of cruelty, but out of biological truth, to find who can lead without losing himself. Every emotional test is a mirror held to the man's inner world. If he reacts, she knows his peace is fragile. If he remains composed, she feels his power. And that feeling, more than anything else, is what ignites respect. The Diogenic law of value teaches that you do not win people by chasing them. You win by mastering yourself so completely that others feel your stability as presence. You become a center of gravity in a chaotic world. Women, drawn by instinct, move toward that calm the way ships move toward a lighthouse. They do not follow words, they follow energy. The man who commands himself commands the room, and the man who commands the room commands the world. Diogenes never sought to dominate the feminine. He sought to understand it. He knew that what men call mystery is often just simplicity beyond their control. A woman's nature cannot be conquered, but it can be harmonized with, and harmony begins only when a man's emotions are no longer the leash that leads him. The one who governs himself governs every dynamic he steps into. That is why Diogenes smiled when people mocked him for sleeping in the streets, for having nothing. They could not see that his poverty was an illusion. He was richer than kings. because he owned his mind. He had achieved the rarest victory, to be free from need, and in that freedom he became untouchable. He had decoded the truth that modern men still chase, that your worth is not found in possession, but in composure. That the one who does not beg for attention eventually becomes the center of it. That when you stop trying to control what's outside you, you begin to influence it without effort. Diogenes understood that power does not come from dominance, but from self-command, and that the one who can master his own nature inevitably masters the hearts that orbit around it.